you can't just write anything, you know. You have to write and then realize, okay, this has to be made into a film one day, and it needs a budget, and you know, you need actors, and you have to work out kind of all these logistics as you're actually writing the script. Whereas you're writing a novel, you can just go for it.
Can you tell us a bit about your background in filmmaking? Did you go to film school, for instance?
Well, I started in photography, stills photography, and I slowly found my way into filmmaking, and went and studied that. So I think all up, I've had 3 years of still photography training and 4 years of film training, which I did at the Australian Film School, and majored in directing there, and did it like 3 years intensive directing, a bachelor there in Sydney.
Wow, that's brilliant. So it sort of started from the cinematography, photography, and then it grew to more sort of directing and writing, because I know you've written this upcoming film of yours as well. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, as a photographer, I was always interested in telling stories, and I think I got to the point where I wanted to tell stories with the moving image, and not just be confined to the still image. I mean, you can still tell stories with the still image, but for me, I wanted to dig deeper and tell stories on a deeper level. And I found that film, movie making was the way to go. And once I worked that out, then I just kind of just focused on that and just chased it.
That's brilliant. And so with your upcoming film Expired, can you tell us a little bit about what it's about and where the idea initially came from?
Well, 10 years ago, I went to Hong Kong and I just fell in love with the place. And the story just came out of being there. I felt it was a very futuristic and romantic place. And Expired is very much like that. It's a futuristic expression of love, really. And yeah, it just, over a period of about 8 years, the film was written and made, while I was doing other films along the way.
Oh wow! So it took 8 years. So while you were filming other sort of projects, you were sort of continuously sort of writing, getting ideas together for this film.
Yeah, I mean, every trip that I made to Hong Kong, I would do more work to the story and the script, and it just slowly evolved. It's an interesting film because it's kind of a combination of different genres. It's drama, it's sci-fi, it's a thriller, it's romance, and I just think it took a long time to work out what I was actually trying to make, and it was just kind of on the back burner as I was making other films. But at the same time, it was having a big influence on the other films I was creating as well.
Oh wow! And is there with Expired, is there like an underlying message that you wanted to send to audiences for them to sort of see and understand?
Oh, look, I'm very careful about trying to directly influence audiences with a message, but it is an expression for me of where we may be headed for in the future. Are we headed for a future where we rely less on love and trust for the sake of surviving and looking after ourselves, or are we going the other way? Are we being more connective in the future? And I think this is, I don't know if it actually goes one way or the other, the actual story, but it's an expression of that, and to get people thinking about who we are and where we're going.
Hey, that's great. And with this project, because you wrote it and directed it yourself, what was that like? Because that's wearing quite a lot of hats and trying to get that balance. How did you find that?
I consider myself, I don't know, maybe as a writer first, but at the same time, as I write as a director. So I'm visualizing the story as I write the story and working out how it's going to be done. I mean, it's just, you can't just write anything, you have to write and then realize, okay, this has to be made into a film one day, and it needs a budget, and you need actors, and you have to work out kind of all these logistics as you're actually writing the script. Whereas you're writing a novel, you can just go for it, it doesn't matter. But yeah, it's for me, writing and directing and shooting the film, editing the film, doing music for the film, all these things I do. And all these things for me is a very natural process. And I always tell people that for me, it's just like doing a painting. I don't see why making a film can't be like that.
No, that's brilliant. And I was going to say, one of my next questions actually was that I understand you're involved in a lot of sort of, you do writing, directing, editing, cinematography. You've got a range of sort of creative departments. Can you expand on how much this has helped you as a filmmaker, sort of being skilled in a lot of areas of the film, sort of from technical aspects to visuals on screen? It must really benefit you in a lot of ways as a filmmaker.
Yeah, it's difficult to try and quantify it. You know, you spend time writing, and then you spend time directing or talking to actors, and then you spend time color grading or doing visual effects and sound work, music work. For me, it's all very similar, but you do notice a shift in your brain when you go from one thing to another. You kind of realign something within your brain. But what I have found over the years is that when you do change from one task to another, it sharpens your mind. And when you go from, so you go from editing back to writing, you find that your writing is sharper because your mind has gone through some sharpening process as you've been editing. And so it's like back and forth, you go through all these different kind of tasks, and you sharpen your mind in the other areas. And I'm just really becoming very conscious of that at the moment.
No, that's great. And I love writing myself. So one of my questions was sort of, when it comes to your writing process, can you give us a bit of a breakdown of how you go about your writing process? And would you have any advice in particular for other writers that want to write, say, treatments or actually tackling the first draft?
For me, from a creative point of view, I always start with the location. I think the power of place is number one. And when you do that, you find things can start to flow from there. Every story has to be set somewhere, and that location is what actually informs your characters. And then that informs the decisions that your characters make, and that defines your characters, and that defines actually what the story may be. So for me, it's a pretty simple process. If you think of the power of the place where the characters live or they've evolved from, then you just, you give them decisions to make, and then you go from there. And, there's obstacles and all that kind of business. But for me, I sit down and I just write the screenplay. I don't do treatments or outlines, because for me, a lot of the power is actually in the moments. And you don't get moments when you write treatments and outlines and stuff. That becomes kind of the broader picture stuff. And so I enjoy the go from the detail from the beginning, because the detail can actually evolve and grow into something bigger.
Now, I completely understand what you mean, because sometimes I think writing a treatment in a premise and things, sometimes they almost feel like obstacles stopping us from actually writing and tackling a script. But no, that's great advice. Thank you. And when it comes to the casting process as well, how did you get your actors on board? Did you have any actors in mind in particular?
The role of Dr. Bergman, I wrote specifically for Hugo Weaving. And I already knew Hugo, and he acted in a previous film. And so I was pretty confident that Hugo would be interested in doing it. And I had worked with Ryan Kwanten previously as well, and I was pretty happy that he agreed to come on board with that as well. But I do try to set up a situation where I can connect with the actors when I'm writing the script, and they can be involved in the script writing process as well early on. And then that also allows you to finance, because you have your cast attached, and cast is kind of the number one important thing these days, I think, to getting a film financed, is having your cast from a very early point.
No, I think that's a really good point, actually. And it's quite a unique idea, because I think for some script writers, it's their script is their baby and they don't want anyone to change anything about that. But for you as a writer, I think that's really good that you let the actors come on board. And if they're not sort of sure about something, they can sort of put their own spin on it. So no, that's great. what would be your overall advice for filmmakers that want to get into the industry?
I think the number one thing I would say is just ask yourself what your end game is. What do you want in the end? And work backwards from there. Because there's so many options now. You know, do you want to make something for YouTube or Facebook or Netflix or Amazon, or do you want it on the cinema? You know, so there's so many end games that are out there now, and for me, you kind of have to choose what you want, what the end game is, and then you head for that. And there's all kinds of ways to get to that end game, but without that end game, I think you're just kind of floating in the ocean.
That's really great advice. No, thank you so much, Ivan, for your time. You've been fantastic, and all this advice has been amazing. So thank you so much for coming on Film Forums today.
Thanks for having me.